This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey everyone, quick heads up here. There's a little bit of spicy language in this one. So, Margaret, can you give me like a personal vibe check on this week's presidential debate? Margaret Sullivan writes about the media and politics over at The Guardian.
Well, there's a certain amount of wanting to just hide under a couch or something, which I'm also hearing from a lot of other people like, oh no, it's going to be so weird and so strange. Do I have to watch it?
This debate is somehow the only thing anyone can talk about, and also something a lot of people seem to be carefully avoiding.
I think it will actually have pretty high audience ratings. I think people are extremely curious about it, and it just could be, I don't know, I may be doing a lot of cringing. I'm not sure.
Tonight's debate is going to be strange for a lot of reasons. It is the earliest a presidential debate has been held, before the political conventions have technically selected Donald Trump and Joe Biden as their candidates, and well before any polls open. It's being run by a TV network with Trump and Biden directly, which bucks decades of precedent. Then there's the fact that this debate was a bit of a surprise. You know, well into 2024, it was really unclear if any debates would happen at all this year.
Yeah.
Trump had famously sat out the GOP primary debates, and Biden wasn't committing to debating Trump. And there were some people who were like, don't do it. Like, don't give him the airtime. Why do you think there was so much uncertainty until now?
Well, there's a lot of cons for each of them. So, I think for Biden, for both of them, they're both gaffe prone. They have memory gaps. They sometimes get dates wrong or worse names. So there's a lot of chance to mess up. But I think that they're doing it because they both feel like there's a lot of advantage for them.
Yeah, a debate expert I spoke to said when a race is close like this, you have to debate because you're looking for any advantage you can get.
I think that's right.
The question now is, once these guys get behind their podiums tonight, what do they really need to accomplish?
I think that it's really essential for Biden to do reasonably well, but I also think that he can do reasonably well by not screwing up, because the bar has been set so low, particularly by right-wing media, which is like basically trying to portray him as a barely ambulatory corpse. I've wondered in recent days if Trump wouldn't just bow out and just claim that because he doesn't like Tapper or he doesn't like CNN or whatever, that the whole world is rigged against him. There's always an excuse, but
it could still happen.
It could still happen. It could still happen, and it wouldn't be shocking.
Today on the show, we are getting ready for the debate, which is still on, last time I checked. Because let's face it, tonight it's going to be hard to look away. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Discover. When it comes to your finances, Discover wants you to know they are the credit card that is always there for you. With 24/7 U.S.-based live customer service, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We are talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard. This episode is brought to you by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI will not help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia, or identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks, or automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations. So you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. When the lights go up on the two candidates at 9 p.m. Eastern tonight, there are going to be some rules they'll be following. Both men will be at podiums. Microphones will be muted when it's not a candidate's turn to speak. Neither Biden nor Trump can have props or notes. Biden won a coin flip that allowed him to either choose what side of the stage he'd be on or be the last candidate to speak. He staked out the right side of your screen, which means Trump will have the final say. The debate will be moderated by CNN's Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. I asked Margaret Sullivan what she thought of that pairing.
Well, I think that Tapper in particular has been pretty upfront about challenging Republicans who are election denialists. And for a while, I don't think this is true anymore. And I think this was, some time ago, he was declining to have any election denialists come on. But I think CNN has kind of changed their tune about that. But I think in general, I do not think he's partisan, but I do think that he is, pretty tied to what a crazy thing, pretty tied to the idea of democracy and rule of law and all that stuff. Dana, I don't have as much of a handle on, sort of what she might stand for, but I think she's smart.
Dana Bash, some people might remember from the first Trump-Biden debate. She went sort of viral because as soon as it ended, she said, that was a shit show on live TV.
You use some high-minded language. I'm just going to say it like it is. That was a shit show. And, we're on cable. We can say that. Apologies for being maybe a little bit crude. But that is really the phrase that I'm getting, more, from people on both sides of the aisle on text. And it's the only phrase.
Oh, yeah. So I guess you could say she speaks her mind. And they're both really experienced. And I think that, I'm just very curious about how much of a role they will play in pushing back, in directing things. How much are they going to be sort of participants or just kind of foils for the candidates? That's a question in my mind.
The final thing that I think we have to mention is the fact that there's going to be no studio audience there, which is a departure from previous presidential debates. Did it surprise you when this rule was put in place, or did it seem like the obvious choice?
I think it's a good choice, but it is a little bit surprising because I think it probably makes from the network's point of view, it might make things a little bit more interesting and a little more compelling and more engaging and therefore more likely to attract the big audience.
You mean to have people cheering and jeering?
To have people cheering or just to have some reaction, be able to sort of scan the audience and see how people are responding to a particular thing. But that is not going to be the case. And again, I do think from a kind of seriousness and, public spirited purpose point of view, it's probably a good thing because it reduces the distractions and it just keeps the attention strictly on what's being said and how it's being said. And I really feel like how it's being said is going to be such a big deal.
Why do you say that?
Well, because, and I think Robert Reich, who also, like me, writes for The Guardian, wrote a piece very recently this week in which he said that he thinks that the American public has been sort of taught that stridency equals strength. And Trump is very strident. And Biden is a much more low-key speaker. Now, that was not the case in the State of the Union, as you may recall. I mean, he was really kind of very pumped up to the point where people were saying like, oh, he's on performance-enhancing drugs. And there's, no reason to think that, even though it's gotten a lot of attention. But in general, Biden is kind of a low-key speaker. He himself has spoken a lot about how he's suffered with a stutter earlier in life and has had to overcome it. He's not a natural, great public speaker.
You've mentioned this performance-enhancing drugs thing that I feel like the Trump campaign has thrown out there about Joe Biden.
Yeah, not just the Trump campaign.
Where did that come from? Why is it important? Because I think for the last year, they've been talking about Biden as essentially senile, too old to do the job, and stumbly, and There was a Wall Street Journal piece in the last month or so, which featured a lot of Kevin McCarthy talking about how Biden has lost a step. There's been a lot of that messaging.
I think the effort here on the part of Trump's allies, which include right-wing media, certainly Fox News, is to sort of get out in front of the idea that Biden might be like he was in the State of the Union, might be fiery, might be lively, might be revved up. And if so, the message is this couldn't possibly be because he's competent, but it must be because of drugs.
This is classic Trump because it allows him to win the debate regardless.
No matter what. Exactly. And, we saw this during the Hillary Clinton campaign against Trump when there was all this talk about how she was on drugs and, she wasn't on drugs. So it's an actually, pretty nasty part of the spin.
It's been interesting to me, though, to see the rumors kind of spin forward from these right-wing outlets. Like there was a rumor that Biden asked to sit for the debate, which is not true. But, you saw people like Elise Stefanik and Josh Hawley tweeting it out as fact.
Well, that's what happens now. I mean, there's really, I think the culture of say anything and never admit that it's not true has really metastasized in the past, since 2015. But, I've also seen headlines and stories in mainstream outlets about, sort of about this thing of performance enhancing drugs, but put in the, it's always couched like, oh, the right wing is trying to say that this is happening, but it's also a way of discussing it.
It's giving air to the idea is what you're saying.
It's giving air to it. It's giving a certain amount of credence to it. Like, oh, did you, it sort of lends itself to people then saying like, oh, I heard that. I heard that he takes some kind of, upper before he goes on stage. And there's no evidence of that.
Because this election is a repeat of 2020, we actually know a lot about how Trump and Biden act in this debate format. Is it worth going back to 2020 to talk about previous matchups, just to look for clues for how things might go tonight?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first debate of 2020, as Dana Bash said, was a shit show.
You have spent the last...
Because they want to give good health care.
If I may ask my question, sir.
Good health care.
It was Chris Wallace.
At the time, he was at Fox. Now he's at CNN.
He couldn't begin to control Trump. And the whole thing was awful. And it didn't actually reflect well on Trump at all.
Of course I have.
Well,
I got rid of the individual mandate.
I'm going to give you an opportunity.
I got rid of the individual mandate, which was a big chunk of Obama. That is absolutely a big thing. That was the worst part of Obamacare.
Sir,
Chris, that was the worst part of Obama.
Let me ask my question.
Well, I'll ask Joe.
Yeah, I mean, you wrote that Wallace needed, at the very least, a mute button, maybe something stronger, a penalty box or a stun gun.
Something, yeah. Well, at least now we have the equivalent of a mute button. But, they are, I believe it's 8 feet apart on stage, which is not that far apart. Again, I go back to Trump and Hillary Clinton on stage together when he was, kind of using his size and maleness, I guess, to seem pretty intimidating. Kind of like, I just remember it as being sort of circling around behind her in some sort of weird way.
Okay, Donald, I know you're into big diversion tonight, anything to avoid talking about your campaign and the way it's exploding and the way Republicans are leaving you. But let's at least focus.
Yeah, it felt like a display of aggression.
Yeah, it really did, and I don't know that she was prepared for that or handled it particularly well. But given the fact that there's no ability to interrupt, I don't know. Trump may have something else in mind or just may make it up on the spot. It could be wild. I don't know.
How are the campaigns messaging what to expect here? Like I've heard Biden's campaign talking about, dutiful preparation, going to Camp David. Sounds real like typical, basically.
Right.
Trump campaign, very different.
Yes, the Trump campaign has gone out of its way to say, he doesn't really need to do traditional. He's not doing, kind of mock debates with someone standing in for Biden and someone standing in for the moderators. He's doing these policy briefings.
So he's cramming.
Right. He doesn't, he has said, I think recently, it's not it's it has to come naturally, and it's so much of it is instinct, and so much of it is attitude, and we know that that's kind of his way, as opposed to Biden, who again is a traditional, long-term politician who has done this kind of thing many times before, and I guess clearly knows what works for him. Plus, he has he has a traditional team of people who are used to preparing somebody for a debate. So, I guess we'll see whether winging it or, traditional preparation is the way to go. We're going to find out pretty soon.
After the break, it turns out this debate, it's going to have a third main character. This episode is brought to you by Discover. When it comes to your finances, Discover wants you to know they are the credit card that is always there for you. With 24/7 U.S.-based live customer service, everyone has the option to talk to a real person anytime, day or night. Yep, that means no more waiting for, quote, normal business hours just to get a hold of someone. We are talking real service from real people whenever you need it. Get the customer service you deserve with Discover. Limitations apply. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Hey, everybody, Jon Stewart here. I am here to tell you about my new podcast, The Weekly Show, coming out every Thursday. We're going to be talking about the election, earnings calls. What are they talking about on these earnings calls? We're going to be talking about ingredient to bread ratio on sandwiches. I know you have a lot of options as far as podcasts go, but how many of them come out on Thursday? Listen to The Weekly Show with Jon Stewart wherever you get your podcasts.
Other than the candidates themselves, there's going to be another entity with something to prove on the debate stage, which is CNN itself.
Right.
Can you just explain for those who are not following the media the way you and I are, why the stakes are so high for this news network right now?
Well, CNN hasn't really found its identity in recent years, and it's been struggling to do so. It is, of the three main cable news networks, Fox, MSNBC, and CNN tends to come in not a distant third, but certainly third among the three.
No executive likes that.
No executive likes that. And then, of course, there was the phase after Jeff Zucker, who led CNN for quite a while, after he was, ousted, they brought in a guy named Chris Licht, whose whole plan was to kind of take CNN down the middle, kind of big tent.
He was Mr. Both Sides.
That's right. He went out, he visited Republicans in Congress to say, to the extent that you haven't felt welcome on CNN in the past, that's over. We want you here. That, too, didn't work particularly well. And there were a bunch of kind of missteps. And then before too long, he was out. Mark Thompson is running CNN now, and he hasn't had as much to say. But I think that he wants CNN to be more successful. He wants it to be leading rather than following. So there is a lot at stake.
Yeah, the last time the network had a big presidential event, like a year ago, it really didn't go well. This is in the Chris Licht days, but it was a town hall hosted by Caitlin Collins. It had a crowd that just got a little out of control, and it was widely reviled.
So this was, a little over a year ago, and it was billed to the public as a place in which undecided voters or, independent voters were going to gather to hear Trump, questioned. And it quickly became apparent that the audience was very much in Trump's camp.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Can I talk?
Yeah, what's the answer?
Do you mind?
I would like for you to answer the question.
Okay, it's very simple to answer.
That's why I asked it.
It's very simple you're a nasty person, I'll tell you.
And they were cheering wildly and, really being pretty partisan.
Margaret says this moment in which the audience turned on CNN and its talent was telling. It lays bare a beef that's been simmering for years at this point.
If you cast your mind back to the 2016 election, one of the things that you heard the most chanted in rallies and so on, in addition to lock her up, meaning lock up Hillary Clinton, was CNN sucks. And then there was the whole dust up with Jim Acosta, in which he was denied his White House pass for a while. So there's been a lot of rancor over the years between CNN and Donald Trump. And, he's used it as kind of a representative of the mainstream media, which is so, he would say, so unfair.
It's funny, when you put it like that, it almost seems strategic that CNN is hosting the first presidential debate, because it allows Team Trump to basically be like, these guys don't matter anyway, And you can already sort of see them talking about CNN and how it's a dishonest news source. And so, yeah, we're doing this, but we all know what's up.
Right. Especially, I would say, if it doesn't go well. They could blame it on the moderators. They can blame it on the rigged. Just the whole world is rigged. We did this because we thought it was the right thing to do, but obviously we couldn't get a fair shake.
Yeah, I mean, on Monday morning this week, a CNN anchor had to boot a Trump spokesperson off the air because they were talking about Jake Tapper and Dana Bash as biased news anchors.
Well, first of all, it takes someone 5 minutes to Google Jake Tapper, Donald Trump, to see that Jake Tapper has consistently,
we're going to stop this interview if you're going to keep
President
attacking
Trump
my colleagues.
Adolf Hitler.
Ma'am, I'm going to stop this.
So you can sort of see them laying the groundwork brick by brick here.
Right, and that was quite a moment. Cassie Hunt basically just said, thanks so much. Come back sometime when you're willing to actually answer my questions.
Colleagues have stated in the past.
Okay.
Now,
I'm
for
sorry,
this
guys.
debate,
We're going to come back out to the panel. Caroline, thank you very much for your time. You are welcome to come back at any point. She is welcome to come back and speak about Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will have equal time to Joe Biden when they both join us now at later this week in Atlanta for this debate. Our thanks to Caroline.
So there's already a lot of high emotion and kind of performative stuff going on around this.
Okay, so for me and my listeners, I'm just sort of wondering, how do we watch tonight? Like, how do we consume this event, given everything we've just said about how Trump operates and the stakes for both sides? Are there ways we should mentally prepare to see what we're about to see?
I mean, I think it's good to keep some, be interested, but keep some distance from it too. I mean, I wouldn't advise making it a huge part of any decision making. And I mean, I just cannot believe, Mary, that there are too many truly undecided voters in America, people who actually will go out and vote, who haven't made their mind up. I mean, these candidates are just so different. They stand for such different things. They promise such very different futures that I don't really know that people's minds are going to be made up. I think the only thing that could be important is if people are thinking, I don't like either of these candidates, I'm going to stay home. And if the part of their thinking is because Biden isn't competent, he's senile. So if he can kind of come off as, pretty vigorous and with it, which I'm sure he intends to do, that might change some minds. And I would also say, very little attention has been given to how Trump has been going off the rails recently. So if he does that during the debate, that could change some people's minds as well.
Do you want to talk about that? Like the things that have been happening at Trump events, the things he's been saying? Because I agree with you. He's been really wilding out. And I don't know if there's one example where you'd say, like, listen, see if this guy shows up tonight.
Right. Well, I can't remember exactly which rally it was, but he went off into this thing that did get a lot of attention about sharks and being electrocuted.
I say, what would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery and the battery's now underwater and there's a shark that's approximately 10 yards over there. By the way, a lot of shark attacks lately. Do you notice that? A lot of shark.
It was a rant against like electric cars and electric batteries, right?
Right. But somehow sharks entered into it and being bitten by a shark or being eaten by a shark.
And which you'd prefer, electrocution or being eaten by a shark?
Do I get electrocuted if the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking? Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Because I will tell you, he didn't know the answer. He said, nobody's ever asked me that question.
It's really unhinged stuff. And I don't think it's very hard for a story, like a news story in a newspaper or online, to get at this. So, and this is the argument against what I've been saying, which is don't take Trump live in large chunks, because actually it would be the one way to show people how whacked he is. But if he does some of that during this debate, that kind of thing could be pretty important too. But I don't think he's going to do that.
You think he's going to get it under control?
Well, he's already even said that. He's actually said the shit show word. This is not going to be another shit show.
That's interesting, because it gets to another question I had for you, which is that in the past, you've warned about normalizing Donald Trump. And I sort of wonder if there's a way to host something called a presidential debate and not normalize him. He's already talking about it as a chance to normalize himself. But the whole premise of a debate is based on a meeting of two equals.
Right. I mean, I guess the mere fact of a debate that's held in a traditional format does do that. But it's very useful for people to see the two candidates and hear them questioned and hear how they respond. But yes, I mean, it does have the effect of normalizing him. And he isn't a normal candidate. I mean, if I were running the Democrats' campaign, I wouldn't walk away from the chance to do it, because Biden really has something to prove.
Margaret, I'm really grateful for your time and your insights. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks for having me.
Margaret Sullivan is a columnist for The Guardian US, writing on media, politics, and culture. She's also the executive director of the Craig Newmark Center for Journalism, Ethics, and Security at Columbia University. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, and Anna Phillips. We are led by Alicia Montgomery with a little boost from Susan Matthews. Ben Richmond is the senior director of podcast operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.